So welcome everyone to this this Friday webinar. It's great to be with you again, and it's wonderful to have Congressman Tim Ryan, my friend and colleague, and now a guest on the webinar. So welcome, Tim. It's great to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And I'm going to talk a little bit more about Tim and introduce him a little bit myself, and then be asking him questions about who he is and how he got to be this kind of remarkable representative of all of us, not just of his own district, but of all of us. And then we'll be talking about our hopes and plans for what's going to happen with the new administration. And there's some questions that some of you have asked that I'll also be sharing with him. But we'll begin, as always, by sitting and breathing together, which I think we probably both need, because both of us have been moving around and doing a lot of different things today already, I'm sure. So let's sit comfortably and allow our breathing to deepen. And if you feel comfortable, let your eyes close, because remember, it removes a great deal of external stimulation. And breathe in through your nose, out through your mouth, with your belly soft and relaxed. And remember, this is a concentrated meditation, so we're focusing on the breath coming in through our nose and out through our mouth, on our bellies softening and relaxing, and on the word soft as we breathe in, and belly as we breathe out. If thoughts come, let them come. Notice them, let them go. Gently bring your mind back to soft belly. Okay, let's open our eyes, bring our attention back in the room. So, as you heard, I described Tim Ryan as a friend and also a colleague. Now, that doesn't mean I'm in Congress, and it doesn't mean that he got his MD degree. It means that we're colleagues in this movement to bring healing and wellness and mindfulness and mind-body medicine to ourselves and to everyone in this country. And Tim has been an incredible advocate for both for mindfulness and nutrition and mind-body medicine in his years in Congress. He's been a leader in this whole movement. And he's introduced bills to expand access to integrative medicine services in the VA and provide relaxation training in elementary schools in his Ohio congressional district. And he's also, and I want to come back to this a little bit later, he's also the catalyst behind the establishment of the House Wellness Center. And I want to find out what that's all about and how that's functioning now. And Tim, right now, you are in your office in Congress right now. So, and you're in session right now?
Yes.
Great. I'm so glad you're able to find the time between
You're getting your tax dollars worth.
Okay. So can you begin by saying a little bit about who you are, where you came from, and then how you got interested in this whole field of integrative medicine, integrative health, mind-body medicine, mindfulness, nutrition? Seems like an interesting journey. So tell us, where do you come from? And first of all, how'd you get into politics and why? And how did you move into this field that we're all in together?
Yeah, I grew up in Northeast Ohio, just outside of Youngstown, Ohio, small little town called named Niles. And grew up, like a lot of kids in that area, a lot of people in that area grew up Catholic. My family was very involved in the church. My grandfather was an usher. My grandmother was in the rosary group. My mom helped with the festivals and the different things going on in the church. So I grew up there and played a lot of sports and football and basketball and baseball, just kind of normal upbringing, divorced parents and all that good stuff. But very working class. And so that's I was a quarterback and was always kind of in some leadership role. But when I decided what I was going to do with my life, I was very interested in politics. I had interned for the local congressman. I had went to John F. Kennedy High School. The school was very much working class Catholic, very much social doctrine, social gospel, being involved in the community. And so And my family was always involved primarily with the church, but always volunteering and doing things. And so when it came time for me to decide, I'd kind of caught the political bug, and my area was devastated economically. I mean, we lost steel mills and all kinds of tens of thousands of jobs. And that was kind of the environment that I grew up in. And so when I had a choice to do something, I ran more for local reasons, really more than anything else. And so I ran for the state Senate. And then 2 years later, I ran for Congress at 29, and I was able to win. And I've been here ever since.
Great. Well, one of the things I appreciate about you so much is that you are very down to earth. You're very, very real, which is, and particularly in Washington, D.C., especially refreshing.
Yeah. I can't help it.
So what do you think? You mentioned your Catholic upbringing and social gospel. That seems important. Can you say a little bit more about how that's been, since you got here to Washington, how that's influenced what you've done in Congress and what you're hoping to do?
Well, we were raised and taught through 13 years of Catholic school that you have an obligation to help other people, to be of service to other people, based on the teachings of Christ and his life. And so, at the time, you don't realize this is all like making its way into your head and into who you are, but it sticks, and it stuck for me. And so my career has really been spent on two things, I would say, Doc. One is, how do you help other people around their economic status? I think we have a moral obligation to make sure that people have opportunity for good paying jobs. I think the government has a moral obligation to, create an environment where people can be the best that they can be, become competent. That's the only way for them to be free. We have a moral obligation to make sure that everybody has health care. And so I took that into my public life, and it was that. And then I guess where guys like you come in, and Dr. Hyman and a lot of other people, is that's the commitment, is how do you try to help other people, but how do you do it in innovative ways? How do we do this with new ways of looking at old problems? And that's where, my my mindfulness work and meditation and yoga and healthy living kind of cross paths with, okay, if you're really going to help people, you need to help them heal. And you need to make sure that they're functioning at a high level. And so my career really has been that balance of, like, some people just think I'm some lunch bucket Democrat from, outside of Youngstown, Ohio. And some people think I'm Congressman Moonbeam. And, it's like, it's not, it's very pragmatic ways of helping, working class and poor people. And that's what I've been committed to.
Well, that's beautiful, because that's one of the things that's lost in, I don't know if it's lost in translation, but people tend to think, oh, there's this split between those people who want to live more meditatively, more mindfully, and that's simply the province of people with money to spare and time to spare. And one of the things where you and I meet is on the understanding that this approach is for everyone. So can you talk a little bit more about your own experience, and then how you began to reach out to share what you've been learning with others through legislation and through talking with your colleagues?
Yeah, I mean, it started personally for me. I had a local priest, Father Crumley, at St. James Parish in Warren, Ohio, which was just kind of across from my old high school. He taught me centering prayer. Thomas Merton and all the desert fathers who practiced centering prayer. And so I started doing that and was like, well, holy cow, this is like really powerful stuff.
Tell people what centering prayer is, because a lot of our viewers won't know.
Yeah, so centering prayer is it's come down through the years from the Desert Fathers, so a bunch of saints and holy people from 1,000 years ago. Developed this meditation technique. I think it's Lectio Divina, where you actually get a word or two or a small phrase from the Bible, and you begin to meditate on it. But it's very, very similar to other forms of meditation. And when your mind goes off, you come back to your word that you have, and you can develop your own word, whether it's Jesus or Christ, or a friend of mine uses the word abide, and you keep coming back to that, to where you can really drop into, in our faith would be drop into the Christ that is within you, that higher power, the higher intelligence that we have. And so it's it's almost like a mantra based technique.
Or like the concentrative meditation we did at the beginning of this program.
Sure. So instead of your breath, you have a word, right? So that's kind of how my journey started. And then it was Deepak Chopra and Wayne Dyer and their techniques that they taught, and 7 spiritual laws of success, and books like that. And I just slowly, but what really cemented it, if we're going to be forthright here, I was a big sports kid growing up. Loved watching the NBA, loved watching football, and I caught wind of this Phil Jackson guy at the Chicago Bulls, and what he was doing with his players, with meditation, with yoga, with these other things. And I was a Celtics fan, but obviously a huge admirer of Michael Jordan and the way that team played. And so I got Phil Jackson's book called Sacred Hoops. And in that book, he had books that he read that influenced his spiritual journey, like Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind is the one that I went out and bought. Mm-hmm. And so that it kind of affirmed for me that I was going down the right path, that this is something that's pragmatic, it's real, it's about performance, but there's also the spiritual dimension, which connected to, my centering prayer and my upbringing. And so it all kind of came together, and I started viewing this through sports and through performance. And while that may be an entry point, it goes well beyond that, as you know. Who cares how you find it? Who cares why? But it, like John Kabat-Zinn says all the time, these practices start to do you after a while. You try to do them, and then they do you. And that was the journey. And then, so, I did a couple of weekend retreats at Zen Mountain Monastery in upstate New York. I would go to, different, I went to an abbey, Mepkin Abbey down in South Carolina. I went to a monastery in upstate New York. And then I did a longer retreat years later when I was in Congress with John Kabat-Zinn, which was 5 days. That was my first real extended silent retreat, and then did week longs and did weekends and 4 or 5 day retreats for a while there, back when I was not married and without kids, and I had time to do that kind of thing. But that, just to wrap this up, that started to affect, like, holy cow, because I was on the appropriations committee. We had all these vets coming back from the war in 2008, 9, 10, 11, in the midst of me in the middle of this practice, really learning and trying to embody some of these practices. And so I thought, man, this has got to be great for veterans. I remember going up to John Kabat-Zinn at the end. I mean, I was in tears going up to him. It just had touched me. And I think I was processing a lot of trauma and different things, that you accumulate over your life. And I said, well, this got to be great for veterans. Oh my God, I wish someone would have taught me this in elementary school. Why aren't we teaching this in our healthcare system? Stress is such a killer. And all these light bulbs are going off in my head. And John said, this is happening everywhere. And there's a lot of research going on. And that eventually led me to you, where, we developed a friendship years ago as I started to explore and meet more and more people. And then the legislative piece came, some of what you mentioned earlier, working through the VA to promote some of these projects, working through the Department of Education, Department of Defense, and a House Wellness. Now it's called the House Wellbeing Office, that we started here a couple of years ago. That's just getting off the ground now for members of Congress and staff. It'll be an actual office here. Of course, we'd love for you to participate and be a part, but we're offering these different services. Tara Brock and Jack Cornfield do a mindfulness thing. They're organizing all kinds of different projects, and we would love to include you and your center in on that.
Great. I'd love to work with you on that. One of the things that you've observed and that I've observed is that so many people, including veterans, are very eager and very open to these practices. One of the difficulties, I think, has been how to encourage people who are making the laws, your colleagues in Congress, how to encourage them to be more mindful, to be more meditative. So I'm wondering both what you think, because it's a profession in which, unfortunately, there isn't nearly enough mindfulness. That there's so much, sort of focus on getting things done and pleasing this one and, worrying about that and making sure you're elected. So much pressure. You would think it could be a field that people in Congress could be wonderfully receptive, but it's not so easy. Can you talk about how you've been trying to move ahead with your colleagues in Congress?
Yeah, well, we used to, it's hard in Congress, but it's hard. I'm very connected to the people in my district, and I see single moms, in the middle of the pandemic, trying to make ends meet. They're waitresses or waiters or bartenders, or in there, they're not making the money that they were making. I mean, and they're still hustling and still working, and their kids are at home now doing virtual learning. And so I always try to make the point, like, this is all of us, this is us as a country. We're all dealing with this. And I've tried in Congress, because it's been so toxic here, that I think and we're supposed to be role models and we're supposed to be examples. And I also want to be clear, like, I'm not perfect. I go to the House floor and scream and yell and, but, when issues are important to me, or I'm upset about something, and part of mindfulness and being aware is to, I was fully aware I was screaming and yelling, I was like, and I was for what I thought was a good reason. But anyway, that's why I wanted to do the wellbeing office here and have it here. So no matter what happens to me, how long I'm here, that we have established this office where these resources are there for members of Congress and their staff to be able to access. And once we got it up and running, COVID hit, so it's a little bit harder than than normal, but they're doing a lot of online stuff. I used to do that out of my office. I would invite teachers to come, and Sharon Salzberg, Andrew Weil, and others would come and teach different little techniques. And I would just do that through my office. And I said, well, I can't keep doing it. So we started the well-being office. That's what we're trying to do. As well as pushing legislation, testifying before committees around certain projects, especially around the vets. That seems like the real opening here, because so many people recognize that the suicide rates are still so high, and they need help, and people are open-minded to how we can do that. So that's kind of been like the entry point for most of this, is through the vets.
I don't know if you know this. We're right now working with the largest division of the VA, VISN 8, which is Florida, South Georgia, and the Caribbean, and we're training 300 people there, 200 whole health coaches, and 100 of the leaders in the whole system. Wow. In a model of mind-body medicine, and it is having incredibly powerful effect. And many of those whole health coaches are veterans themselves.
Nice.
And what we're seeing is, at first some of them are skeptical. What does this have to do with teaching people how to take care of themselves? What do we have to do this meditation and self-disclosure and in these small groups? But they're having enormously powerful experiences. And what's happening is the whole culture in this system that serves 1.5 million vets, and there are 30,000 employees, is beginning to change in very powerful ways. And one of the things that I've observed working in war zones and after climate-related disasters and school shootings, is that when there is a crisis, that people tend to be more open. And because conventional approaches may not have worked or only worked partially, they become more open to other possibilities, including the possibilities of mind-body medicine and of sharing trauma, just as you described yourself, experiencing, past pain, past hurts, and having an opportunity to come out with them and not just keep them inside. So we're seeing this opportunity with veterans. And I'm hopeful, as I mentioned to you, I'm hopeful that we can create this movement to heal our national trauma. And I'm wondering what you think about that. If we can we engage people in Congress? Can we engage people in the administration? I know you mentioned Deepak is very involved, Deepak Chopra, the David Lynch Foundation. I'll be talking with John Kabat-Zinn and Andy Weil and many other people. And what I'm wondering is, as you and I think together about this, how do we move ahead, Congress and the administration, to understand that coming into this kind of balance, becoming more mindful, more meditative, coming together in groups to share with each other, that this is fundamental to our well-being? What are your thoughts about that? How do we move this ahead?
Well, I think we do what you're doing. I can't wait to hear more about what you're doing down with the VA, because and I wrote in my book Healing America that I think we have these institutions that are in place: the Department of Defense, the VA, public education, universities, our healthcare systems, whether they're private or Medicaid or Medicare. So we already have the systems in place. Delivery systems, I guess you could say. How do we innovate these systems? How do we infuse your work into a Medicaid program, for example, or a school program, for example, in Ohio, to where you're training doctors and nurses, and you're training teachers, and you're training the people who do the after-school programs and the summer school programs. So over time, you can see how do we teach this in our colleges of education, our colleges of nursing. They're doing something really interesting down at University of Virginia, where they're embedding I think it's a Buddhist or the philosophy department, but Buddhist meditation students, and they're kind of cross-pollinating that with the nursing school, so that nurses are also learning these techniques that can help guard against burnout for them over the long run. things like that, I think, are how we really build this thing out. So nurses are learning it, teachers are learning it, police and fire, obviously police and community leaders would be a hell of an opportunity for us to, maybe bring the temperature down. And I saw that in your proposal of what you're trying to do, that's a component of it around the criminal justice system. I think that's critically important. These cops are stressed. Everyone's scared. I mean, the cops
Absolutely.
are scared. Kids in communities of color are scared. And when you get scared people in a heightened moment of conflict, that's when tragedies happen. And so, what's our strategy? So anyway, the long and the short of it is take these institutions that we already have and update the software, update the programming with the kind of things that you're doing. And David Lynch is doing with his foundation with Bob Roth, and he's got a great team over there. Mindfulness-based stress reduction, just infuse that. And so, but then you do that through reimbursements, right? So doctors would have an incentive to, teach. They would get reimbursed for teaching someone mindfulness, or they would get reimbursed for teaching someone a relaxation technique, just like they would get reimbursed for a visit. So that instead of just the default position being write a prescription, they're going to get reimbursed for actually helping you deal with your trauma or whatever. I think that to me is how you do it. And there's so many good programs out there. Project Welcome Home Troops, the YES program with the Art of Living Foundation. I mean, there's so many that are just, and I've done them all. I'm like the guy that goes through the buffet, and I'm like, I'll take that and that and that and that. I have my daily practice that I do, but I love experiencing all these different programs because I think they all get to the heart of the matter.
Well, I'm really glad to hear you say that. One of the challenges in doing this organizing, I chaired White House Commission on Complementary and Alternative Medicine Policy, and this is a kind of reprise of that, but in a different way. And it's getting sort of one of the difficulties that people have had is working together. That may not surprise you. But all of these organizations, and now I'm reaching out to all those organizations, and I really welcome your help and your partnership in doing that, because we need to come together. There's too much sectarianism. It's my way. No, it's my way. As opposed to seeing, we're all fingers pointing at the moon, as the Zen Buddhists say. We're all different paths that are leading to the same point. So I'm going to need your help in reaching out and bringing people together.
Yep.
I wanted to talk to you about Congress, though, because I don't know if I told you the story.
We were having such a nice conversation. Now you're going to go ruin it.
Hey, why not? With a little challenge.
All right,
our work is preparing us to respond to challenges.
That's right.
I was in South Sudan a year and a half ago. A human rights lawyer who's one of our faculty, South Sudanese human rights lawyer, who's been organizing women and giving them crafts collaboratives in South Sudan. You'd love her. So we worked together, and we found a way we issued an invitation to the two major political parties, this may have some resonance here, who are not only opposing each other, but have been killing each other in the countryside for a number of years, the New Era, the Dinka, basically. And we said, can we come together? Can we help you deal with the trauma of these years, deal with all the stress? Are you willing to come together and spend a couple days with me and with my colleague, Anieth, and we'll do a workshop with you? And to my great joy and a bit of surprise and satisfaction, they said yes. And on the opening day of this meeting, there were about 80 people, leaders in both of these political parties, as well as leaders of the women's movement, the leaders from the army. They were all there. And the meeting, the workshop, was opened by the Secretary of Agriculture. And he got up there, a very serious looking man, and he said, his opening remark was, "We cannot have outer peace unless we have inner peace."
Whoa. And
I thought, whoa, this is wonderful. And I said, how are we going to do that here? And so that's yes, it's a challenge. How do we think about creating that opportunity for people to understand, people in our political parties, our political leaders, to understand that connection, which was so obvious to him, obvious to you and me and many other people. How do we bring that into the political world?
Keep talking about it. I mean, I think the pandemic is, unfortunately, all the pain that it's caused. I think it's also going to provide an opening for a new view of the world, a new approach in the world, that people are going to be looking for. And it's going to be those frontline workers who are getting burned out, the doctors, the nurses, the workers in our nursing homes. A lot of the pain and suffering with the teachers. I mean, my wife's a first grade school teacher. I mean, just it's an enormous amount of stress that she's under trying to balance everything with our own kids and in her classroom. It's just, so I think this issue around anxiety and stress is going to actually, as you said, you hit that wall and you don't know what else to do, and there's not enough bourbon and wine to get you through it, and you got to look for something else. And that's where I hope people like me and you and all the other friends that we mentioned are going to be able to step into that void. And the idea to have veterans, which is why I think it's such an important first move for us from a strategic standpoint. One, that's the most immediate need. A lot of these vets are killing themselves. It's still over 20 vets a day. So it's an immediate need. But also, if you think you're traumatized, no matter what you've been through, and you see a vet that has been healed by your program or one of these other ones who had post-traumatic stress from the war zone, that they were healed, then I think you will be more inclined to say, well, I could use a little bit of that. And it's a veteran, it's not a soft thing. It's like, look, we got to heal. And so I think there's going to be an opening that's going to be bigger than it has been. But think about how far we've come. I mean, you're sitting here talking to a congressman about this stuff. It's when you look at these athletes now, the performance, when you look at the Seattle Seahawks and you watch some of these teams and these athletes perform, they have some kind of centering, meditative, contemplative practice that they do. And that you just don't you're not just a quarterback with a bunch of 6'7", 340-pound people coming after you, and you are cool as a cucumber while they're all around you. You have to practice something that gets you in that zone. And so it's permeating our society. I mean, we've come a long way just in the last 5 or 6 years, I think.
I agree. I agree with you. And I think part of our work is to bring, and I'm glad you're saying this, is to bring the veterans, to bring the sports figures, we work a lot with police and firefighters, to bring those people forward and to be able for them to talk to the people who have the official power, and they have unofficial authority, but the people who have the official authority, elected representatives and people in the Biden administration. So I'm hoping, in the days, weeks, months ahead, we can organize and do that and help this whole movement to take shape and have this shape embodied in legislation and embodied in the practices and in the funding from the federal government. I don't know if you want to say any more about that now, or we'll just be working on that from now on. But any other thoughts about that, Tim?
Yeah, no, we did some language when we reauthorized the Elementary and Secondary Education Act, where it would social and emotional learning and these other kind of programs would qualify for that money. And now that Vice President Biden's in, and he's an old friend, and we know a lot of his people that he's putting into these different cabinet positions. So we're going to have a lot of friends to be able to work with. The new chair of the Appropriations Committee, Rosa DeLauro from Connecticut. We've already had numerous conversations about social and emotional learning, about centering pregnancy and centering parenting, where you do these small group. They're basically classes for single moms that are coming from struggling communities, to really teach them prenatal care, teach them about breastfeeding, teaching them about how keeping their kids healthy, keep their stress down. And it's like 11 or 12 moms, pregnant women, and a doctor or a nurse that coaches them up. So there's including these kind of techniques. So now all of a sudden, there's another opportunity there. So I think continuing to fund and promote those, even if it's quietly, over time, this stuff all starts to add up.
Great. It's great. It's wonderful what you've done, and it's great to think about this opportunity, because I couldn't agree with you more. Now is the time. Hippocrates spoke about healing crises, and this is a healing crisis. I don't know if you saw the piece I had on NBC Think. I think I sent it to you. I'll send it to you. But this is a healing crisis, potentially, if we're able to make use of it. And if we're able to bring in these approaches that can promote healing and move us forward out of all the places that we've been stuck. And when the crisis comes, it does become an opportunity.
Yeah. Well, that's the wisdom. A couple friends of mine were very high up in the Trungpa Rinpoche family. Back in the day, one of the first Tibetan Buddhist teachers to come to the United States, and they told me he had this saying when something came up, some issue of conflict, that some people say, oh, it's time for dinner now, it's time for dinner, and he would say, it's time for dinner, and dig into the conflict. And really, because that's how the healing comes. That's not easy. That's
not easy, but it winds up being so much easier in the long run, because what we see with veterans, what we see with first responders, with us so often, if we don't deal with it, it causes so many more problems. I don't know if you know the line from the Gospel of Thomas. You know the Gospel of Thomas? Yeah. It's one of the Gnostic Gospels, not the canonical Gospels that you studied. And what Thomas, and supposedly these are sayings of Jesus as well, what Jesus says is that which you do not bring out can kill you. That which you bring out that's inside can save you. Yeah. And this is the time, I think, to bring out all those things that we've pushed down, that we haven't dealt with, that can save us, bring us back into balance individually and collectively.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember seeing that. That's a good one.
So we have some questions, specific questions. I could go on talking with you like this for a long time, and I hope we'll do it soon again. But there's specific questions from some of the people who knew that you were coming on with me. So let me ask you a couple of those. How can you or we take action to support taxes on sugar-sweetened beverages, restrictions on marketing junk food to children, and funding farmers markets and urban gardens in low-income neighborhoods?
We've done a lot of that in the most recent agriculture appropriations bill. I just had the sheet here on my desk. I wish I still had it, but we've increased funding for all of these little programs, just like the ones you're talking about. I think when you're talking about, anytime in this society you're talking about tax increases, it's obviously a very complicated issue. I think if you're going to have that conversation around taxing sugary beverages, it needs to be part of a more comprehensive approach, not like it's just a tax on something, but where's that money go and how does it work? I think that's going to be really, really important. But your main point is this: how do we begin to develop a food system that allows people to access healthy food? And I've been pushing really hard around regenerative agriculture to get us away from industrial agriculture with all the pesticides, all the overhead costs. And there are a lot of farmers now. It's almost similar, Jim, to the vets, having the vets make the argument for you. You have farmers who are actually making money through regenerative agriculture, talking to other farmers, so that they're saying, well, they talk the same language. It's not you or I talking to these farmers. So moving to regenerative agriculture, making sure that in our schools we are actually funding and supporting and delivering good, healthy local food to our schools instead of highly processed, very sugary, chocolate milk or Rice Krispie treats. What drives people nuts, and I think this is the argument that we need to start making, is that, of course, we want every kid in America to have breakfast, right, and lunch. But why are we subsidizing this food that's nothing but sugar and highly processed? Because in a lot of our school districts now, over 50% of the kids in public school actually are poor. So they're on the Medicaid program, which is the healthcare program for the poor and disabled and all that. So we feed these kids really bad food. They're on a healthcare program that the taxpayer is paying for. And over time, they have very high rates of diabetes that we have to pay for. So I think whether you're talking to a conservative or a liberal or an independent or a Green Party or whatever, it's like, why are we doing it? Why wouldn't we pay to feed them good food and reduce our own health expenditures? I think the average voter would be like, thank God somebody's talking about this. This is crazy. So as you begin to make these arguments, I think we're going to build a bigger and bigger coalition of people through smart public policies.
So a question to respond to the questioner, what should the questioner do? What should the thousands of people who will be viewing our conversation, what can they do to move ahead the agenda that you're talking about? How can they make a difference?
There are a lot of different organizations out there. I would Google whatever your particular interests are, and you will find a lobby group or an organization that advocates, whether it's for urban agriculture. You can Google regenerative agriculture. There's a great new documentary out called Kiss the Ground. They have a little movement. There's a group called Food Corps. That's a great group that you can join and be a part of, and they advocate for these policies. But again, we've got to make sure that these are mainstream ideas, and that means building up the advocacy organization. So you can join and support those kind of groups, and they come to Congress with ideas and visit with people like me and chairs of the Agriculture Committee and all the rest. So that's the best thing to do.
And where do they find these advocacy groups in this area of agriculture and food policy?
Yeah, you can just Google them. Search on Twitter, search on Facebook, any of those that I mentioned, and
Could you say the names again so people can catch them? A couple of the groups.
There's one's the Environmental Working Group. Food Corps is one. Kiss the Ground is one. So those are the key. Those are the key ones, and then you have your kind of more traditional ones like Sierra Club and others that starting to dabble more and more in agriculture and regenerative agriculture. But yeah, I would do regenerative agriculture. A lot of the celebrity chefs now are getting involved in the regenerative agriculture in the healthy food chain, and so that's a big part of it too. So you can see how this is kind of you could build this thing out. You're talking about veterans, you're talking about celebrity chefs, you're talking about farmers. If we can be seen as from my vantage point, like a political leader that's helping farmers make money when they're going bankrupt left and right, and the suicide rates are so high, businesses are crashing. So if you can be seen as helping them, then they're going to be supportive of the policies that help them make money.
One of as you were beginning to talk about agriculture, you were saying, and about food and junk food, you were saying this needs to be seen in a larger context, and that relates to other questions that people are asking. The next question is how, with everything so divided in this country, how can we provide that larger context and encourage more people in all parts of the political spectrum to pay attention? What are your thoughts about that? And what can you advise the people who are watching us to do to make that a possibility?
That's a great question. I like these new ideas that we're talking about here. This goes back to the original question. You could be a lunch bucket politician, but what are the new ideas? When you start talking about things like regenerative agriculture, you are leapfrogging so many polarizing issues, and people won't really understand totally what you're talking about, which means they don't have an opinion about it yet, which means they don't fall into if I put on my red shirt or my blue shirt so I can have a fight about this particular issue. You're talking about something that is a unifying issue, like the soil. Like we need healthier soil. And that's the essence of regenerative agriculture. So you can pull Republicans and independents and libertarians and Democrats all around an issue. Another issue like social and emotional learning that has the support of in large measure to what Tim Schreiber has done, who chaired Castle Collaborative for Academic Social and Emotional Learning. Amazing leader in the education realm. But anyway, it has the support of the Brookings Institution, which is a left Democratic liberal leaning think tank, and the Heritage Foundation, which is a right conservative leaning Republican think tank. They agree on social and emotional learning. So how do you pick 2 or 3 veterans, right? 2, 3, 4 key issues that we can agree on to move forward on? We don't have to have every issue like we're going to take care of everything at once. Let's change the conversation. Let's start building coalitions around simple first steps. And the journey of 1,000 miles begins with 1 step. And so let's take that step together around issues that aren't so polarizing. And we've got to get away from, on both sides, I think this is the problem. You got these purity tests and you got to agree with somebody 100% of the time. And, this is my agenda. It's like, look, if you take something like regenerative agriculture, farmers make money. You build resiliency in the soil. You build, it's better for droughts and withstanding droughts and floods. It holds more water and it sequesters carbon. So you have farmers making more money and you're sequestering carbon. So if you're interested in reversing climate change, this should be something that you should say, yes, let's take that first step before we get into some other polarizing discussion about something that's not going to pass Congress. But you'll be right, and maybe you are right, but it's not going anywhere. So do you want to be right, or do you want to start taking steps? And something like regenerative agriculture can kind of help us thread the needle. So I'm interested in finding those kind of issues that again, with the food, and you got me all fired up, but with the food piece too, is make the argument to a conservative that we're going to bend the cost curve on healthcare big time by focusing on prevention. And maybe it's not about covering everybody. Maybe it's about running a more efficient system that's going to actually save taxpayers money so we could cover more people. Things like that. You just got to be creative on how we talk about things to people.
Beautiful. I'm going to tell you one little anecdote about the social emotional learning. We began working in Broward County, Florida, the Center for Mind Body Medicine, after the shootings at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. So we were brought in to deal with the acute trauma there. But now our work is expanding throughout the county, and there's a visionary superintendent. I don't know if you know Bob Runcie. You ought to know him. He's the superintendent, 6th largest school district in the country. Well, bring you guys together sometime.
Okay. All right.
But anyway, what he got immediately is exactly what you're saying, that our work with mind-body medicine fits beautifully well with his emphasis on social emotional learning. And what he has said publicly is that the psychological, the social, the emotional aspects of every child in the school system is equally important with academic achievement.
Yeah.
And so the work is moving ahead, and it's moving ahead with all the different parts of that county, which are very diverse in many ways, politically, ethnically, etc. So I agree with you. And I want to ask you this last question before we conclude, because I know you have to get moving, is how are you going to change the discourse in Congress? How are you, the way you're speaking is so sensible, so thoughtful, so humane, so Catholic, this time with a small c, so embracing of different perspectives. How can you advance that here now, and how are you going to work in these months and years ahead to make that more the way other people in Congress are seeing the world and legislating?
Just by trying to do it more often, to be more willing to reach out to the other side and find these issues that we can agree on, and less of a focus on what we disagree on. I think Vice President Biden, when he takes office, is going to help with that as well. He spent a career working across the aisle in the Senate, achieving really big things by working with Republicans. So I think he's, the president, whether we like it or not, in many ways is the cultural figure of the country, like the Pope is the cultural figure of the church, and so I think he's going to help really set that tone, and I hope I can be, a foot soldier in all of that, really trying to, in Ohio and other places. And the other thing too is, when we campaign, we have to go see people. I mean, the Democrats have a terrible problem in rural America, and it's because many of our national candidates, I mean, this election obviously couldn't, but don't go there, So a lot of people think that the Democratic Party doesn't care about them, and then we don't show up and confirm their suspicions. But I think, which is why I think we need to go into rural America with some big ideas, like regenerative agriculture, like broadband, like building up, downtowns and rural communities and cleaning up their rivers. And I mean, they've been abandoned. Corporate agriculture has come in and destroyed rural America. There's been a huge consolidation with the seed industry and the chemical industry and the meat industry. I mean, it's just been totally consolidated. In the 50s, a farmer used to make 50% of the dollar, 50 cents on the dollar of what the food was sold for. Now they make more like 10 or 15 cents on the dollar, and it's destroyed the rural communities. And so, part of this is going to places and having really uncomfortable conversations, time for dinner, and listening to what people have to say, and put policies in place that can help them, kind of get themselves back on their feet. And that's ultimately, you can see how politics and spirituality have a very big intersection between the two if it's done right, and it could be a healing process for our country too. And I guess, since this is the last question, I mean, just think of what America and the world will look like if we help rural America move to regenerative agriculture, and farmers start making money, and veterans and minorities are able to go into farming and make a good living, and we can heal some of these communities in rural America. And if we can implement a lot of the things that we've talked about today in our VA, in our healthcare, in our education system, in our colleges and universities, Medicare, Medicaid, all of these things, man, that's kind of the country you want to live in. It's got some really cool stuff going on, and everybody's a little more centered and a little more balanced, and not popping off left and right, not stressed out of the max. That's kind of the country I want to live in, and that's definitely the kind of country I want my kids to grow up in. And so, all of these things tie together around economic security and well-being, and it's up to us, Jim. Now we got to work it out for us.
We do, and Tim, it's such a joy to hear you speak and to feel you and to know that this is your heart, and this is your soul, and this is your commitment, and that it goes very deep, and that your arms are very big, and that you understand the connections among all these aspects of the way we live. And I know that I'm looking forward to working with you more in the future, and I'm so happy that you're there in Congress, because not only for your perspective, but for your very being as an example of somebody who lives what he says. And I'm hopeful that with this new administration, you will be really an example for Congress and a leader as we come together and happy to be together on this program. So we're going to breathe together for about a minute, and then we'll close the program, close this part of our conversation, which will continue down the road. But thank you so much, Tim, because you're always so generous with yourself and sharing your vision and sharing yourself with others. So let's breathe together for a moment. Just relaxing, breathing together before we come to a close of this session. If you happen to hear a sound, come back to the breath. Okay, thank you, Tim.
Thank you, Doc. Appreciate
Great
it. Love you. Big hug.
Okay.